Well, welcome everyone, and welcome to our first part of our series, our You Are Employer series, recruiting in the COVID era. I'm really excited about today's session, and I'll introduce myself as well as I have our panelists introduce themselves in a moment. My name is Joe Testani. I'm your moderator for today, but I'm also the Executive Director and Assistant Dean for the Greene Center for Career Education here at the University of Rochester. We have a great group of people to join us to have a really in-depth conversation around COVID and how it's impacted recruiting over the last 6 months and what they think maybe is how it's going to continue to impact that over the next few months. And hopefully this will be really great information for you as, for students and young alumni as well, navigate sort of the disruption that's been caused by COVID. Here in the Greene Center, we've been working to adapt and pivot over the last 6 to 7 months to continue to support our students, as well as work with many of our employer partners to provide them with opportunities to recruit on campus and recruit virtually with our students. So it's been an interesting ride. I think we anticipate some more changes coming in the future, but I think that's why we wanted to have a great conversation with some folks that I think can really shed some light on how they're thinking about this, and they really bring a range of experience from different types of organizations and different sort of recruiting strategies. So I think it'll provide some diversity for that. So I'll have each of our panelists introduce themselves, and we'll get into some questions, and then we'll also leave the time at the end for any participants to pose some questions as well. So without further ado, let's get into it, and I will call on our panelists to introduce themselves and give a brief introduction about their background, and also talk a little bit about their organization and what their organization does. I think that's will help set the context, set the table for our discussion today, because they represent some different backgrounds. So I'll start with our U of R alum, Alan. If you'd like to introduce yourself and give a little bit of background, I would love that.
Sure. My name's Alan Sikora. I've been with First American Equipment Finance for 18 years now. I'm the CEO of the company. We have 265 employees. Of those, 250 are located in the Rochester area, and we probably employ about 60 or 70 U of R grads, so both undergrad and graduate students. What we do at First American is we're a commercial equipment finance company, so we provide leases and loans to organizations like hospitals, schools, manufacturing companies, and professional service firms so that they can acquire technology for their business. So you can imagine if a law firm is investing in a data center, that's a leasable asset, and so those are the types of services we provide.
Awesome. Thank you, Alan. Thanks for being with us today, too. Really appreciate it.
Sure thing. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Annie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Annie Capella. I'm from Innovative Solutions. We're a small IT company right outside of Rochester. We're about 2 miles from RIT out on East River Road. It's a beautiful tech campus. We redid the old Kodak training facility. So a lot of people that were there in the 1970s, if you see it now, it looks completely different, which has been really fun. But we focus on cloud migrations and custom app development. And for myself, I've been in career development for a little over 10 years.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us today, Annie.
Thanks for having me.
Allie?
Hey there, I'm Allie Maron. I'm a campus recruiter at Ernst & Young, or EY. It's a professional services firm. We're global. We recruit for 4 service lines: assurance, so audit, tax, consulting, and strategy and transactions. Me personally, I've been at the firm for 3 years. I started as a recruiting coordinator, and last June took over as the University of Rochester recruiter for the firm as a whole.
Thanks for joining us, Allie. It's been great to work with you over the last year or so. So thanks for all the work you do. And definitely last but not least, Jay.
Hi, my name is Ron Machunder. I'm the CEO of Brighton Securities, a wealth management firm based here in Rochester. I'm also a Simon School grad, so not an undergrad grad from U of R, but a grad school grad. I guess, so I came here 6 years ago after a short career, well, maybe not short, it was almost a decade on Wall Street as an investment banker. We at Brighton Securities have a number of different verticals, but mainly we deal with individual retail client wealth management, as well as institutional 401k management and cash management. So I got to be honest, I'm the only U of R grad at Brighton Securities, just because of some of the demographics of our employees and our makeup. But that doesn't mean that we aren't open to hiring U of R grads. We've been very open to it in the past, and we will continue to be.
Well, we won't hold it against you. I think this is a good opportunity to expand that reach to more grads, both Simon and undergraduates. So thanks for being here, Jay. Really appreciate it. And we'll stick with you, Jay. And I think to level set and maybe set some context, I think let's start with just a sort of a general question of how has COVID and the pandemic impacted just your business and your organization more broadly? Not necessarily recruiting, but just generally speaking, how has it, if it has, impacted the work that you've been doing?
So a lot of these meetings, this one included, right? 12 months ago, this would have been an in-person meeting and it would have counted as a recruiting meeting. I've had more recruiting meetings, both with experienced potential hires as well as undergrad potential hires or inexperienced potential hires over Zoom and over the phone than I've had probably in the years before that. Sure. I'm probably a little bit more liberal in this sense of like, I'm willing to meet someone in person, but obviously respecting social distance and yada, yada, yada. But it's changed completely how we do business, not just from a recruiting standpoint, but if you think about our core business, it's a very face-to-face, hands-on client business. Yeah. It's completely changed that side too. Yeah. Into a completely virtual workplace. And I got to be honest, I'm not a doctor, and there's probably more qualified people than this. If I read the tea leaves and see the psychology of people, I think some of these things are here to stay, quite honestly.
Yeah, I think I would definitely I'm looking forward to that part of our conversation to really get into how all of you think this will evolve over the next 6 months to a year. Annie, how has this pandemic impacted how you all do business at Innovative Solutions?
Well, we at Innovative Solutions, our tagline is people plus technology, because we're a person-first organization. And so it's been really interesting for us transitioning to a work from home model. We were very much you have to be in the office, a very present company. And so it's been really hard for us as a company to transition to, just seeing each other over meetings or Zoom happy hours and, a lot of Pictionary late at night, which can only it only gets you so far because we just miss that social element. But in terms of the actual work itself, it's been an easy transition for us. And I think one of the things that's been so interesting about that is that the work was easy to transition, but the social piece is what we miss so much. And so for us as a company, we really strive to make sure that we're bridging that gap and think of all the things that we do, especially when we're bringing on somebody new who hasn't been immersed in our company yet. They're not meeting the people, so they don't have that base in which they're using to then connect with people over Zoom. So how do we make people feel welcome into our company? And that's really one of the major things that has changed as we bring on more remote workforce for us.
Thanks, Annie. And then you worked on creating such an amazing space too here in Rochester. So you want to show that?
Yeah, people miss it a lot. We have a barber shop in there that I think we've seen a couple people sneak into.
Well, I went 6 months to get a haircut, so I think that's something that I would probably sneak in for as well. But...
Oh yeah, I didn't blame them one bit. I pretended I didn't see. I was like, yeah.
Alan, how about yourself? How has the pandemic shifted how you all do your work? Is it relational, like Jay and Annie were talking about, or is it a little different in terms of how it's impacted you all?
Yeah, thanks. We've had really. Oh, I'm sorry. Was that Allie or Alan?
Alan.
Oh, me? Okay. So we've had unique perspective because we sort of pioneered a sort of centralized distribution model over the past 20 years. And so we have 265 employees, of which 250 are in Rochester, but we build relationships with hospitals and colleges and law firms across the country. And so we do it through Zoom. So in 2019, we did 5,000 Zoom meetings with prospective clients. And it was sort of a point of differentiation for First American. And then all of a sudden on March 13th, the rest of the world quickly caught up. So, for us, very similar to what was mentioned prior, we were used to coming into the office every day. We actually have Zoom studios in our office to conduct client meetings. But it's sort of how colleagues lean on one another and the camaraderie and everybody coming into the office every day sort of on, working hard toward a common goal. You do sort of miss that. It's almost like every month that passes, the culture is impacted by like 1% and you're just, hoping it doesn't last, another year or 18 months.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And Allie, I think, EY obviously is a global brand and global organization. So have you seen an impact on your business bottom line? And how do you think the pandemic is impacted? And obviously it's probably diversified because you have offices all over the world. And but I'm curious as to how you've seen that impact the business as a whole.
Right. So it definitely depends on the service line that you're talking about. I think in terms of our people advisory services, which is actually HR consulting, that's booming. A lot of companies are rolling out new policies. And so they are taking on consultants to try to figure out how to navigate this new world. For me, on the actual company HR side of things, it was an easy transition because the firm as a whole is equipped to work from home. Like pre-COVID, I was traveling to campuses a lot. We have a lot of professionals that do travel to their client site regardless. So we're given a laptop and we are in training to work from home. I mean, I worked from home every Friday, regardless of the current situation. So it was natural. Although, we do miss the in-person connectivity. So that's just a matter of being pretty diligent about logging off. And a lot of members of my team I know have a hard time just shutting things down and trying to get outside and that piece of it. But overall, the firm business-wise has been fine. We're luckily still doing campus recruiting. So it's been okay.
So a number of you mentioned this social relational aspect, and it sounds like all of your businesses and organizations, that's really an important part of how you do your work, whether it's with clients or with each other. And Allie, I'll stick with you. And how have you maintained the relational aspect? And while the firm was very used to having some remote work in place, obviously having in mass, many people suddenly go remote, I'm sure it was a little bit of a shift. How has your organization sort of culturally maintained some of those connections with each other and really supported or really kind of highlighted ways to stay connected on a relational level?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of virtual happy hours, get-togethers. I know a team on the West Coast for us did like a virtual tie-dye event where they sent everybody a little tie-dye kit, which was super cute. Just coming up with creative events like that. I know my team, we have a virtual wine night next week where they sent us like a little care package of different mini wines to taste. So just things like that. Also being sure to check in on each other. It's just something that we used to do in the office every day. So sending out a group message. I know that my team is super connected via text. We're on that level. So that's been very helpful as we navigate the lack of in-person meetings.
Jay, what about you guys? I think it's a little smaller, obviously, in terms of being here in Brighton, Jay, but how has that impacted? How have you guys managed that and really maintain your office culture and your team culture with this virtual environment?
Sure. So we've done this in a couple of different phases. And for those of you who haven't been to our office, and I'm not sure any of you have been to our office, we have about 15,000 square feet of space. There are 6 separate entrances to our office, and everyone except for our receptionist has an office, including admins and everything else. Socially distancing in our office was how we were kind of set up to begin with, to Ellen's point. On top of that, we've had a philosophy since at least 2015 that we wanted our employees to be able to work from wherever they are, as long as they had a Wi-Fi signal. That means phones have to work, email has to work, our trading platform has to work, everything has to work with Wi-Fi, your laptop, and your phone, right? Glad we picked up on that because that started to really become really important all of a sudden. We found out which vendors were giving us lip service and which ones were really serious about it very quickly. And then from a culture standpoint, we've been doing a lot of Zoom meetings. For the first time, we used to do quarterly all hands meetings on a fairly regular basis. Well, once a quarter. For a while, we were doing them once a week. If you remember, at the tail end of March, the market was down, call it 30%. We thought our revenue was going to be down 30% in the second quarter. We were having all hands meetings telling people, hey, everything's going to be okay. It's not the end of the world. If you look at our workforce, one of our strengths is that our workforce is young, but given the amount of time that we've had between the last recession and this one, a lot of people weren't working in financial services the last time this happened. I was at the beginning of my career in financial services the last time this happened. So it's a different environment. But in terms of culture, we are pretty fast and loose, despite the fact that we all wear suits and formal wear in the office. But I think that camaraderie in the office has really lent itself well, because we've been very understanding of each other, and we haven't done late night Pictionary. We don't have that young of a workforce. We're just young for wealth management. But we have tried to have a lot more fun, and I think we've also had a lot more of a personal touch. There's a wide variety of colleagues that I have. We employ 50 people across the country, as far away as New Mexico, and as close to home as we have an employee that lives 2 blocks away from the office here in Rochester. And so addressing everyone's individual needs. We have some employees who have health concerns that are specific to them, that put them more at high risk to COVID than maybe me per se. I don't mind giving away my health history. But I think having that open and inclusive community of employees ends up being really important. Yeah. And being understanding that Jim in the office next to me may be comfortable coming in, but Jill, who's in the other office next to me, may not be comfortable coming in, and being able to accommodate both of them ends up being very important. That's great that you've been able to do that and accommodate that, but also still maintain some of those relationships and sort of that, the importance of that as well. And you've obviously talked about, the core values for Innovative Solutions being people and technology and being at the forefront. How, I guess, has that evolved since March in addressing some of this? Because, I think a lot of us thought like in March, like, well, we'll be back by August and everything will be fine and we'll be in the office. I know that's what we thought in our team. But I'm sure, that obviously didn't, the longer the summer went on, that wasn't to fruition.
Yeah, I left a very sad plant on my desk that went I thought I'd be back to water it. I was not. But yeah, it's been a huge transition for us. I think one of the main things, one of the main ways that Innovative has tried to combat what's currently happening, aside from the Zoom meetings and the social get-togethers over Zoom, has been that over-communication piece. Yeah. I think that we're trying really hard to address the fact that people are facing more unknown than they've ever have before. So not only the people that we're bringing into our organization, but those that are already there. Everybody's nervous. Everyone doesn't know what the timeline is going to look like, what the future looks like, what HR is thinking in terms of how to get us back into the office safely, what our customers are going through. So we over communicate internally and externally, which is really rare. For a lot of companies, we're a highly transparent organization, and I think that having that already as a foundation really helped us. It's one thing that people really appreciate about Innovative is that transparency. So how we're dealing with it, what the company is going through, what's happening in different departments, even to what our sales pipeline currently looks like. It's out there. And so having that information we found is power to a lot of people. And the other thing is that we're just approaching everything with empathy. A lot of what Jay said as well, it's individualized. I might be comfortable doing something that one of our other employees isn't. So it's all done on an individual basis. And then beyond that, empathy, unlike ever before, for people coming into the organization, I can tend to be a little bit of a stickler, for like a few details when I'm having a first interview with somebody. If there's noise in the background, or if you're not in a great place, or you're running late to things that have just completely fallen away. I found that myself, I've become a lot more human in the way that I work, and I think that that's sort of happened across the board. I have Zoom meetings where I have both of my kids on my lap and a dog barking in the background. I'm actually shocked that no one's come in yet. It'll happen.
It'll be fine. It'll be part of the panel.
Exactly. But I think that's the people plus technology piece too, is just realizing that we are all human, and we're going through this together, and that, having that empathy piece really makes us feel more comfortable, and then, we can do better work and we support each other throughout what's happening.
Thank you for that. And I think it's, it's really important as we talk to students and we prepare them for going out to find internships and jobs, and really looking at how to examine an organization. talk a lot about culture. We talk about a lot about the organizations and some of the things you mentioned around transparency and communication. I think those that responded well to the pandemic, I think, had really good foundations. It sounds like many of you have really good foundational kind of values and things that you found important. And Alan, I think this is something you alluded to when you were introducing yourself. In that, like, what was important and what was already the structure of the organization in terms of how you communicated, how you shared it, how you organized it. How did it have to evolve much, and did you have to really kind of mobilize your team in a very different way, or was it just really an easy transition and really, to Annie's point, maybe more communication just because of the lack of opportunities for in-person?
Yeah, good question. So, while we use technology to communicate with our clients across the country, we still were all coming into the office every day in early March. And so on March 13th, when we decided we're going to sprint out of the building because the world was coming across, there was probably a period of time for the first 60 or 90 days where it was sort of like almost like a critical response time. So, similar to what the other, that's my dog barking, similar to what the other panelists have said. Sorry, those are my children calming down my dog right on cue. So similar to what the other panelists have said, at the beginning it was just frequent communication and frequent touch base with people and a lot of Zoom happy hours. And then slowly over time, as spring became summer and the cases in the Rochester community sort of trended down more, we began to think about what are some of the opportunities for our colleagues that might be comfortable going to a physically distanced event. What are some of the opportunities we have? So, we did a drive-in movie theater night where we got discounted tickets to a drive-in movie theater. At least people could sort of see themselves, sitting out on the, lawn chair. We did food trucks at our office where people could go and pick up lunch and at least see a person or two as they're doing that. We're the title sponsor of the Big Brothers Big Sisters annual golf tournament. And so they ran the charity golf tournament because nonprofits like Big Brothers Big Sisters need us now more than ever. And all of these events aren't the same as how they normally would have been, but they just felt so normal to get at least a small group of people together to just see how the summer's going and see how one another are doing. And I think for some of our colleagues that were very apprehensive about even putting a mask on and being 10 feet away from other people, it was sort of a safe place for them to dip their toe in the water on at least getting back to something that felt a little more normal.
Yeah. No, I think we probably can all relate some story of actually seeing people for the first time that you work with after a few months. Well, I know I was that case. I think probably overly enthusiastic when I first saw some staff members and coworkers, just because so much time had passed and it was so foreign, to be quite honest with you. So I think that reacclimation or re-engagement, I think many people are craving that and wanting that. It sounds like you try to create some opportunities for that as much as people felt comfortable to do that, which is great. I want to pivot slightly to recruiting now and talk a little bit about how this, the pandemic specifically has impacted or changed how you, not only how you've thought about recruiting, but like how you're practicing and putting in practice the process of recruiting. Because many of you I know would be recruiting on campus this fall at the University of Rochester, or maybe finding other ways to think about recruiting. But I'm curious how that pivot has happened and what you're thinking about in this fall as you look at your classes. And are you looking for the same amount of people, or has that contracted some of your business? And Allie, I'll start with you, and obviously in EY and some of their successes at U of R, but also such diversity in terms of the type of talent that you typically look for. How has this impacted how you do it, but also the number of people that you're looking for, either early talent or coming directly from college, or even more experienced folks?
Yeah, so I'll start with the obvious. So we are, as a firm, not physically going to college campuses this fall. So regardless of school policy, EY has decided that we would just fully make everything virtual, but that's fine. We have a lot of consistent programs and internships and different summits and conferences, and everything is able to be moved online. So we're still recruiting for all of those things. We have a Women in Audit Summit, we have our launch internship, we have a Discovery UI conference, we have a Women in Tech conference. Those are just some of them, but they're all happening. It's all virtual. In terms of the amount of people that we're hiring, the numbers are definitely trending downwards from 2019, definitely due to the economic uncertainty in the country right now. But regardless, we're going to be continuing to be one of the largest employers of early talent at the entry level, internships. We had all of our interns complete the internship this summer. We are completely hiring. A lot of our numbers actually look pretty consistent with years past.
Great.
So it shouldn't be going down too much, but we are hiring for full-time and interns across all of our service lines. Like I said, very similar to years past. It's just the way that we are recruiting will look a little bit different. We will have all of our events like info sessions and like virtual career fairs. Just it'll be more important to place an emphasis on the connection between my team on campus recruiting and the students. Sure. Like one-on-ones a little bit more, and tending to that a little bit more than like broader events like career fairs, to create those relationships that you'd get in person.
Thank you for that. Annie, what about you guys? So how has this really shifted how you're thinking about recruiting, and are you still looking to hire students and bring them on into the fold, or more experienced folks as well?
Yeah, it's shifted things for us, without a doubt. It's actually been encouraging for us. We used to stay local with everything, and we still do as much as possible, but we've started to span out more nationally with our workforce, which has been really exciting for us. We've brought on, especially with tech talent, it's something where, you really can work from anywhere. And so bringing on some really incredible people from, states all across the U.S. has been really exciting. But for us, we're just trying to be very thoughtful with every position that we bring on and really make sure that it's something that has staying power. Because what we often like to do as a small business is when we do offer co-ops and internships, there's always the hope that that person stays on with us. And many of the people that we've brought on do. You become immersed in the culture. We don't have that typical internship where you're getting coffee or making copies. That doesn't exist at Innovative. You're working on client work. A lot of the times you're privy to a lot of information, and you instantly become part of the family. So when we are bringing on those internships, we try to make sure that we're being really thoughtful, that it's a position that we can continue to support, and that has a lot of growth within the company, be it within Rochester or remote.
That's great. And Shay, what about you guys? Has this negatively impacted? Obviously, the markets have rebounded, and every week it's an adventure, I think, in the markets and to see what will happen. But how has this impacted how you're thinking about recruiting, and has that changed your approach to recruiting talent?
Sure. I don't think it's changed how many people we're trying to recruit, or either from an experience perspective or a new perspective. If you think about our organization, more than half of our employees are salespeople.
Sure.
From an experience point of view, experience hire point of view, we will take everyone that is ethical and moral and fits into our culture because of that. But from a new hire or someone that's maybe attending U of R right now that's thinking about joining us, we're looking for a different skill set than we were 12 months ago. We're looking for someone who doesn't necessarily rely on in-person communications to win, to build client relationships. And it's a different skill set, because I have people in our office that excel at calling people on the phone and building connections just over the phone.
Sure. And
I had also people that have built their entire practice on face-to-face meetings, like attending charity events, in-person events, professional networking events. And that skill set, I don't know when that's going to be relevant again. I know it's probably not going to be relevant in the next 6 months, right?
No.
And what I suspect is that the societal recovery period where we're open to having those events is going to last quite a while, because it's a psychological thing.
I think that's a really great observation, and you're right. I was on a webinar a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about the future of events, and these big, not only just like charity events, things like that, but just any kind of massive event where people are coming together. What is the future of that? How does that evolve to a next generation? of that. And so what does that mean for some of these businesses? You know, we're very much an in-person business ourselves, the university, right? And so we've seen it sort of disrupt how we do that. Alan, I'm curious if this also kind of relates to some of how you do your work in terms of the events, the in-person interactions. Is it changing for you as well in terms of the type of skills you might be looking for in new hires that you're bringing on board?
Not necessarily the types of skills. I mean, I think we're still interested in bringing on, the best and brightest students and the best talent, and we hire more for potential and, long-term ability to sort of be a fit and contribute to the success of the company. So it's really less about the individual skill sets of somebody right out of school and more about their sort of long-term potential. One interesting just observation about the labor market that I would say is, I think First American is experiencing what a lot of companies experience, which is, average turnover in a normal year for a financial services firm might be, 15, 18, 20%, but in the current environment, nobody's leaving anywhere, right? So you're backfilling less positions. So it does feel like we're lighter from a recruiting standpoint, mainly because literally nobody has left the company since March 13th when this all began. And so there is a little bit of that, but in terms of our hiring plans, they're about where they were, for 2021. We're already in the 2021 budget season. So, we delayed a couple hires just based on a wait and see approach to the sort of economy, but otherwise it's sort of business as usual.
Do you think there's lessons you've learned over the last 6 to 8 months from a recruiting standpoint that you think you'll sort of adopt more on a more permanent basis of how you think about recruiting, how you think about assessing talent, bringing talent into the organization?
Yeah, actually, we have experienced what Annie has experienced, which is now that we're all distributed, there is an ability to cast a wider net. And so, look outside of just the Rochester community and look at least for us, people that might be in Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Albany, that they could get to the office a few times a month for all hands meetings and things like that, but otherwise can, accomplish their goals from home. So I would say we're casting a wider net as well.
That's great. And Allie, obviously, on-campus recruiting, I've worked with, organizations like EY for years, and that's been a kind of a staple part of their recruiting approach. Do you think some of this lack of travel and that sort of thing, it could be a more permanent thing that EY adopts in the future?
Yeah, for sure. So typically when we go to certain campuses, we bring professionals, client servers with us. And what we're noticing with the virtual nature of everything is we can now have like a Rochester grad who lives in California join our calls, join our information session, be a representative at the career fair that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to join us for before. Also, the way that our recruiting process works is we start off, first round interview is a video interview regardless. So no travel is required, nothing's changing with that. But what we noticed from the spring was that our second round interviews that are typically in person were pretty successful over camera. So that was a major, win for the firm, because now we can do these large scale super days through the computer. It's easier. Students don't have to leave their dorm room. They can go to the library. It's easier for everyone all around. So I think that that's going to stay consistent going forward, the video interviewing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, Annie referenced this earlier, but I'm curious, I'd love to hear your perspective, Allie, on how do you onboard people in this environment? Obviously, you're bringing a group of people on right now, and I'm curious to hear from all of you on this one, but how have you thought about onboarding when you physically are maybe not bringing these people into the office? How has that looked? How have you adapted that to our current environment?
Yeah, so we actually had to think on our feet for this summer. We had 33 interns start. They fortunately started about a month after their projected start date. But regardless, we were able to revamp a lot of our content. It typically is a week long, flying them out to Atlanta or to New Jersey or someplace like that, and just running through content for 5 days straight. We revamped it pretty quickly. It was kind of the same. And we've actually thought about making orientation completely virtual going forward, because it just saves time, saves money. Students also like to sit in sweatpants, I've learned, and just contribute to the chat. So it's a win-win for everybody in that way also.
Some staff members too, I think, enjoy that as well.
Yeah.
And what about you all? Have you switched how you think about onboarding, and how's that looked, and how do you convey your, I guess, your office culture or your organizational culture through a very different onboarding process?
Yeah, it's still something I'll have to admit we haven't mastered quite yet. I'd be amazed if anybody has. Tell me your secret. It's because it's so hard to, even when it's your first day at a company and you're face to face with people, there's still a level of, uncomfortable. You want to meet people, you want to be around them, and it's so hard to do over the computer. We have transitioned a lot of our orientation to over the computer, and so much is automated now in general. The paperwork is automated. If you're going to fill out an I-9, it's all automated. So we have to work really hard to make sure that we maintain the human element in so much of what we're doing. Working in an IT company, there's a lot of push and pull. We want to automate as much as we possibly can. We love efficiency, but at the same time, we never want to lose that human piece of it. And so we try to work really hard when we're bringing people on to make sure that they're still incorporated in a lot of that. And so we make sure that we as a company, we meet weekly, which is great. We're only a company of 60, but at the same time, everybody makes sure that they take time out of their day. We have a designated spot on Fridays. And then, if you're new, we prep you, but you will, talk in front of the entire organization and introduce yourself. And then you get a lot of great messages afterwards to make you feel included in the group. And then we're always encouraged by our CEO. He actually calls everybody every Sunday. It's usually a really brief 5-minute conversation, just, hey, how you doing? But at the same time, we're encouraged to talk to him about what's going on, if you have any concerns. So it's the human element all the way from the top, which, really translates well into as an organization, you are more willing to reach out and see how somebody's doing. There's been a lot of reaching out, especially with what's currently going on in Rochester, about how everybody's doing, how their mental state is with what's going on, and just being there for each other through all of this. And so I think that when somebody joins onto the organization, sometimes they're a little taken aback with how informal sometimes that conversation can be around how you're actually doing. A lot of people say, I'm doing good. And then we're like, really?
You sure?
Day one, you really want to know how I'm doing? We do. And the other thing that we do that we try hard with is we try to always make sure that we have a platform for people to speak their mind anonymously. So we have a lot of surveys that go out. We use pulse surveys weekly. And there's always questions around, how you're doing, and not only the positive wins that we want people to share, but maybe things that aren't going well. And we of course don't want people airing out like specific one-to-one instances that are happening, but just in a broader sense, issues that need to be addressed as a company so that we can stay ahead of it and make sure that we are doing a good job around just how everybody's feeling, whether you're new or you've been in the company for 15 years.
That's awesome. That's some great things you've implemented to try to continue the cultural kind of experience that they would feel if they were in person. Jay, are there other things that you all are doing that are different than some of the things that Annie and Allie kind of pointed out? And I guess one other sort of additional question I'd love to hear your thoughts on. What kinds of questions do you think students should be asking when they're going through the process about the onboarding experience? What are the critical questions they should be probing with employers when they're going through this process of looking for opportunities?
Sure. So we're not really doing anything different in the onboarding process than anything that Allie or Annie mentioned. The thing we struggle to replace, and I think everyone's struggling to replace it, is the informal part of the orientation, right? Meeting all the other new hires, not meeting the person that's doing the training, but meeting the person that you meet at the water cooler or the coffee machine going to get coffee. Sure. Because that experience, probably it's super hard to replicate and super valuable at the same time, right? And that's the tough part. And I think we're going to continue to struggle with it. And I think when we figure it out, we'll start onboarding people in person again. So it'll kind of be, it'll work like that. That's how it works. I think the things we continue to do, and we've stressed this over, even before I was here, over the last decade, my door is always open, the CEO's door is always open. We are always open to suggestions, both pre and post-COVID. on things that we could be doing differently. So I always say that there's no such thing as a bad idea. There's no retribution for an idea that we don't implement. I'm not going to be offended if you call me, unless you call me, maybe if you call my mother a name, maybe, but if you call me a name, I won't get offended, right?
Universally out of bounds, right? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there's nothing that is universally out of bounds except for that.
Yes, agreed.
But we continue to try to maintain that relationship. And on top of that, probably all of the best ideas that we've implemented, at least since I've been here in the last 6 years, have not come from me. They've come from other employees who noticed something on the ground that I just wouldn't have seen. It's as simple as the brand of coffee we make, to how we greet clients when they come in the door, to how open we are to some employees. We have a couple of employees that are staying working from home, not because they're worried about coronavirus, but because they like working from home.
Yeah.
Right. and so we've become a lot more open to that. So I think it's changed things. We'll see if it's for the better or not. I think only time can tell, but I think it's definitely changed things, at least in the near term.
What do you think students should be, what's the best way for students to really kind of get at that information? Besides obviously asking like the generic question of like, how's your culture? How have you navigated this? Are there other things that they should be really kind of sourcing from people they're interviewing with to really kind of get real intel or real insights as to how an organization is handling or managing some of this? I think
the questions, and I don't have a specific one, is you need to judge how adaptive your organization is, right? The organization you're speaking to is. Knowing a little bit about Innovative Solutions, First American Equipment Finance, and Ernst & Young, I know all three of those organizations are adaptive, right? I'm backed up by the things that Alan, Allie, and Annie have said on this call, on the Zoom call, but I know they're adaptive because of all the different ideas and things that they've just talked on this 45-minute call so far, on the things they've implemented. That's the things you want to pick up on. When you're asking questions on how do you innovate in the office, pay attention to the answers, because even if it's something that everyone else does, you can get the feel of it just by talking to people in their company. The other thing that I would urge people to do is get the person interviewing to start talking about the ideas they have for improving their organization, because if they feel stifled, they won't have any ideas, sure. Right? If they don't feel stifled, if they feel like they're in an open and honest environment where they're not scared to say that, they'll tell you, right?
Yeah, that's really good insight. Alan, would you add anything else to that? Like what advice to give students as they are going through this process, all virtual, right? And they're trying to get a handle on which organization really kind of they can connect with. What are some of the things they should be asking, or maybe what's effective things like Jay's highlighting is how maybe reticent someone might be to share ideas that they have for their own organization might be an indicator of their openness or their transparency within an organization. Are there other things you think of or you expect students to be asking?
Yeah, I would say even prior to the pandemic, I think it's important to understand like what is the organizational design philosophy of the business? Meaning, how do small teams work with one another? Are they cross-functional, or is it the type of thing where somebody will only work with their department for the first 5 years? I think the more experiences early career professionals can have with other departments and people in other roles, I think it makes for a more fulfilling work environment. So I often encourage people that are coming out of school to really understand like what does the small team look like and what decision rights are within the small team, and then how do decisions get made outside of the team, and just really understanding that I think is important. And I think sometimes that gives you a feel for the ownership mentality of the team you'll be a part of.
That's a great good insight. Allie, what about yourself? What do you, when you are interviewing and you interview quite a few students, especially going into the process, what are the ones that stand out to you in terms of the questions that they're asking? What are the ones you're like, I think the student understands or is asking some key questions that are really going to be helpful to them to make a good decision?
Yeah, so I have a few suggestions, kind of going a little bit away from your specific question, but I just think it's really important for students to take notice of who an employer is bringing to campus. They're a reflection of the company. So I know when I invite people to come to campus, I make sure they're diverse, they have unique experiences, they can speak to the company. They They have really good communication skills. Like, you know, we have a lot of different roles at EY. Some people are heads down coders. I probably wouldn't bring them to campus. You know, they're amazing at their job, but they don't do a great job at explaining what they do to the general population. So just noticing who an employer brings to campus, are these people that you would want to work with? And then going off of that, like, I think I'm a great resource to an extent. I've been in HR my entire life, specifically campus recruiting for the last 3 years, but I don't know what our consulting groups do day to day. So especially now, I would always encourage this pre-COVID, but especially now doing virtual coffee chats. I'm a great resource for the firm as a whole, for our application process, but if you really want to know the day-to-day, the nitty-gritty, I would lean towards connecting somebody within the practice that a student is interested in. For me, a student that stands out are students that ask pointed, targeted questions. If you come to me and say, what would be good with my major, and just hand me a resume, you know, you didn't do your research on the company, and that happens a lot, that does. Just sort of doing a little digging, figuring out what you're interested in. You might not even know the correct like acronym that EY uses, like just throwing some words in there to help me guide you to the right place, the right client server to connect you to. And that comes with the element of preparation. You know, it's before the interview, before coming up to the table at the career fair, prep, doing a little bit of research, that stands out to me. Also, students that are involved in things other than just their academics. It shows that you are interested in other things, even if it's just like one additional like group or something. It adds a little flair to your resume, I think.
Nicely put. Annie, what do you think about advice to students of how they can maybe probe good questions they can be asking to really get at some of the cultural things that you've all shared, but also especially in terms of how they responded to what's been going on in the last 6 to 7 months?
Yeah, I would agree with Allie wholeheartedly. I feel like I can't say it enough when people ask me for advice about interviewing is do your research on the company that you're speaking with. It goes so far, regardless of position. Even, you know, just knowing the company that you're talking to and being able to ask really specific questions. And for us as a company, it's always really impressive, even at an entry level, when a candidate understands how they fit into the bigger picture. You know, so asking specific questions regarding, you know, how the position can grow within the organization, how the organization is growing, what sort of value add they're going to have. You know, those are always things that really set people apart. And then beyond that, it's getting to know, you know, who we as an organization partner with, our different platforms. You know, it's always really impressive, you know, when we have individuals that come up to us that are already working on certain certifications with Amazon Web Services and things of that nature. It shows so much initiative taking that it's always, again, it sets you above. And then we also tend to not hire, you know, based specifically on somebody's, you know, educational history or their, you know, their work history. You know, I sit down with hiring managers and they're like, okay, for this position, I would like someone scrappy. Like, okay.
Right, gotcha.
Yeah, all right, no problem. So much of it is just really letting your true personality shine. I've had a couple of the interviews where I sit down with people and it sounds like they're talking from a script. And I don't now, but I wanted to shake them and say, you know, loosen up. Just be yourself. You know, we have a test at Innovative that we all swear in our interviews, because if you can't handle it, you know, during an interview, when you get on the floor and you're around a bunch of infrastructure engineers and the F-bombs are flying, it might not be the environment for you. Yes. So, you know, we like to see that you can roll with it for, you know, to a certain degree and just be yourself. You know, so if you're scrappy and you like to swear, come to Innovative.
New tagline for the company, I think.
Exactly.
Love to hear one piece of advice that you all have for students to navigate this virtual environment. I think this is definitely an anxiety point that we've heard from a number of students that I've spoken to, some of the feedback, some of the asks that we've had from student organizations and student leaders was that we just want to figure out how to navigate this whole virtual experience and job searching and internship searching. So Annie, I'll stick with you. What's a piece of advice that you'd give to students to navigate our current virtual environment and how to be effective in their internship or job search?
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of advice to be had, and I think so much of it is individually, can be done on an individual basis in terms of what that person is really looking for. But I would say right now, at least for myself, and I'm guessing the other panelists are feeling the same way, with what COVID has done, I'm flooded with applications for each of our openings. I'm going through, I'd say, at least 3 to 5 times the amount of candidates that I typically am. Not only because we are spanning nationally, but there's a lot more people that are either making transitions in their career, or they were laid off due to downsizing because of COVID-19. So one thing that really is always important to me is crossing all the T's and dotting the I's when you're sending out your resume. Write out a specific resume to the job that you're applying for. I can tell when somebody has written something specifically for this opening or this internship versus I'm just applying to every all 20 openings that I see in my field. It makes a huge difference when you go that extra mile to we like to individualize our process, and so it goes a long way when the candidates do the same thing.
Great advice. Jay, what about you? What's a piece of advice for students as they navigate our current climate of virtual engagement that you would recommend students to do?
I'm going to piggyback on something Annie said and maybe say it in a different way. Attention to detail. Attention to detail at all times. Whether that's dotting all your I's, crossing all your T's, writing individualized cover letters for each position you're going after. Knowing if there's alumni from your school that are employed by the company. For example, I don't want to do a plug for another school, but like our entire board is made up of RIT grads, because I'm also an RIT grad, right? If you're an RIT grad and you don't know that, even though it's on our bio sheet on our website, that's probably a ding against you, right? So do your research. All that is going to set you apart, because much like Annie, we get hundreds of resumes for every position we have open. We're looking for people with relevant experience, and probably more than anything, looking for scrappy people. Scrappy, smart people. So easy to find by looking at a resume. But the way you prove that you're scrappy, or the way that you prove that you're smart, is by your outreach to me. If the first time I'm seeing your name is because you applied to our resume dump, that's a hard job to get, right? Because we're only going to pick 2 out of the 300, but we'll pick 2 out of the 2 people that emailed me to interview with. So if we're interviewing 4 people, 2 of them reach out to us directly, and 2 are from the resume pool.
That's great. No, it's a good insight, and I think it's something that students might be inclined to just apply to as many things as possible without giving attention to each of those applications. And I think it's really good insight to say, what, might be applying for less, but maybe tailoring those applications a little bit more and taking the time to build some of those relationships. Allie, advice to students to navigate the virtual environment this fall. What's something that really stands out to you that you think is going to be really helpful for them?
I think that connecting with as many people as possible, and not just somebody on the campus recruiting team. Networking has always been super important. It's even more true now. Sending that email, not necessarily to me, but I'm happy to connect students to other people. I just think that going the extra mile and reaching and actually coordinating time for coffee chats. Also, again, doing a lot of research on the company. We won't be physically on campus. You can't just raise your hand and say, hey, in passing, like asking a question. It's more targeted outreach. But then again, I think this is positive because I know that I'm taking a greater time to get to know students on more of a personal level, rather than just, shuffling them through the process, which can sometimes happen when we have large intern classes like we do at EY. So I think just making yourself stand out a little bit, sending that email, sending that LinkedIn request, taking it a little added step.
Yeah, and I'll plug our office in this regard of we can really help students identify if there are alumni working at different organizations, connecting them to people that we have relationships, whether they're recruiters or working in the organization. So I think using the Greene Center as a resource to identify that, I think is going to be really critical, especially in these times. Alan, other advice you'd give to students as they navigate our current virtual climate?
Yeah, as well as a recession and relatively high unemployment creates additional burden for the students, I think, to stand out, as was mentioned. So I would say, in addition to everything else that was just mentioned, which I would agree with, I would say be creative. I mean, never before have we had such an upheaval in methods of communication. And so show your creativity and don't send an email, send a video from your iPhone. Like, use it as an opportunity to stand out and use the current environment of new methods of communication to stand out, because we're all trying to figure this out as we're running our business and connecting with clients. If we see that a candidate has that same sort of creativity and willing to put themselves out there and try something new, that could be one way to stand out.
I think that's great advice, and I think it kind of brings us full circle back to the idea of organizational culture and what might resonate well with them, where some organizations might be a little bit more conservative and the video might be really something that they wouldn't accept. You would be like totally cool, be like, oh my gosh, the student's showing some creativity and some initiative to communicate with me in a certain way. So I think this is all great advice, and I think it's all great insights that I'm happy and excited to share with our students. I think it's going to be really helpful to them. I'm very conscious of time. I like to stay on time of these things, and I want to really thank each of you for the insights you've been able to provide today. I think it's been really insightful. I think it's going to be really helpful to many students. And I'll do maybe a quick whip around of last piece of advice as students are back in school, navigating this very sort of uncertain, sort of really just evolving time frame. Any last piece of advice you'd give to a student, or maybe advice that you've received that you think might be appropriate or applicable at this time? Allie, I'll start with you. One last piece of advice to share with students to navigate the fall.
Okay, so this is advice that I wish somebody gave to me. Don't be ashamed to ask any question. I feel like sometimes students they come up to me, they say their elevator pitch, and I'm like, great. And there's really nowhere to go, it's kind of like robotic.
Sure.
Be yourself. Don't be ashamed to ask any question. I'm a person too, so I totally understand the fears, especially now. Personally, my brother just graduated college and he's really struggling to find a job. So I said the same thing to him: be authentic, be yourself, because that's really what it boils down to in the end. We're all human, and just don't be afraid.
That's great. Jay?
I'm gonna take the lead from Annie again, and I'm gonna swear and say, just no bullshit. Like, everyone on this call, all the hiring managers everywhere can sniff that out in 2 seconds, whether you're just telling me what I want to hear or whether you actually believe that you're the right person for this job. And that's conversations we have after we interview people. Is this just a pit stop for this person, or do they really want to work here in that position? Do they really want to be an advisor? Are they really trying to break into our compliance side of the house, right? And the bigger the organization you're at, the more that conversation happens, not the less. So just be honest, right? I'm going to tack onto what Allie said and what Annie said earlier. Just be honest with what you want and how to get it. And, I think after that, it's just hard work. It's just hard work of reaching out to all the different places you want. I can remember being a Simon School student. I graduated the Simon School in 2008, so somewhat similar circumstances. Really? I had a list of every single investment bank in the New York City area. And granted, you can't do this right now. I was traveling to New York City every single Friday. I didn't have classes on Friday. I was there every single Friday trying to get a job at one of these places. Today, if you want to be, an IT consultant, man, call Innovative Solutions, but also call Ernst & Young and Anderson and every other IT consulting firm out there and find which one is the best one for you that is also hiring, right? Because someone is. Just because that's not the way unemployment works, that no one's hiring. Someone's always hiring.
Yeah, good advice. Alan, what do you think? Last piece of advice for students.
I would just say be positive. There's so much negativity in the world that, when I go out to campus and during regular times, there's just a certain energy and youthful enthusiasm. And don't let that slip away just because of the current environment. There's still a lot to be grateful for and a lot to be positive about, and have that come through in your communications.
really great thing to remind students of. Annie, you're bringing us home on last piece of advice. You already got the scrappy and
So
soundbite.
much pressure. I know. Swear, be scrappy. And I think my last piece of advice, please don't drop F-bombs in a first round interview. I know that goes against what I just said, but roll with the company and the interviewer that you're working with. But also, you know, it's really hard to do, especially when you're working right out of college, but try to be focused in what you're talking about in the career that you're going after. So often I get people who apply for 10 different jobs, none of them are related. And I'm like, which one do you want? Do you want to work in our finance department? Are you trying to get into sales? And I understand that so much of being young in the career world is about exploration. But at the same time, a lot of the times it's hard for me as a recruiter to understand what are your goals? What are you looking to do? Where is the focus? Where do you want to grow? And so a lot of times the people that I end up talking to are those that, you know, take the time to be a little more focused and understand that it's one specific goal that they're working towards. And a lot of times it's sitting down with a place like the Greene Center before you come and talk to me that has helped you to navigate that path. So take it, I guess 2 pieces of advice. Focus, but first get advice from other people. Use your resources. I wish that I did it more. So many people have a wealth of knowledge to share about this. It's shocking to me, you know, that when you reach out to somebody, how willing they are to help. I've yet to find somebody that I've asked for help that doesn't go above and beyond. And I think the same goes to our students. There's so many amazing resources out there. Use them. And you know, then we'll be happy to have you at Innovative Solutions.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I think it's really good piece of advice, and we often talk about in our office about storytelling and the importance of that, of the student's personal story. And I think you've all touched upon elements of that, of being authentic, being honest, and really kind of maybe articulating what the path is, and no BS, as Jay said. Yeah. I use the cleaned up version, but I think it conveys the same. But I want to thank all of you for your time this afternoon. I think this has been a great conversation. I hope that we are able to send some students your way and join your teams and continue those efforts. And I look forward to working with many of you in the future. This is our first of our U of R Employer Series. Next week, we'll have our second part, which will focus on equity and access as a priority in recruiting. I think it's something that's obviously very present in front of mind for many of us right now. And so we'll have a great panel to talk a little bit about how that's impacting recruiting in the future for some organizations. Thank you again for your time tonight. Appreciate it. Have a wonderful rest of the week. Take care.